Let us begin, not with words, but with a breath. Take one breath, right now, not a performative one, not one you take to show others that you are present, but a real one. Fill the lungs fully, hold for a moment, and release. Notice what just happened. For that one moment, your mind was not in yesterday. It was not rehearsing tomorrow. It was not calculating, not comparing, not worrying, not planning. It was simply here, in this body, in this room, in this moment. That is where we begin, because everything I'm going to say to you today starts from that one simple place, the place you just visited, the place that is always available to you, the place most human beings spend their entire lives searching for, never realizing they have been standing in it all along. You are closer than you think. There is a truth I have come to understand, not from reading books, not from following the words of others, but from years of practice, years of stillness, years of watching the mind with honesty. And that truth is this: the obstacle is not outside you, it is inside you. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because when most people hear those words, something in them resists. The mind immediately begins to defend itself. It begins to list the external reasons: the lack of time, the lack of money, the difficult family situation, the system that was never built in your favor, the opportunities that never arrived, the people who let you down, the circumstances you were born into. And I am not here to tell you those things are not real. They are real. Life does present genuine hardship. The world does contain genuine injustice. There are forces outside of us that shape our path in ways we did not ask for and do not deserve. I will not sit before you and pretend otherwise, but here is what I want you to consider. Of all the obstacles you have ever faced in your life, how many of them were truly, solely, entirely external, and how many of them were made larger, made more permanent, made more impossible by the way you chose to see them? Think of a wall, a physical wall. The wall itself has a fixed height, a fixed width, a fixed thickness. The wall does not change based on who is standing in front of it, and yet two people can stand before the exact same wall and have completely different experiences. One looks at it and sees an ending, the other looks at it and begins to examine it for footholds. The wall did not change. Their perception of it did. This is not a philosophy. This is not a motivational concept. This is something you can verify right now in your own life if you are willing to be honest. Go back to any moment in your past where you believed something was impossible. A relationship that felt like it could never be repaired. A skill that felt permanently beyond your reach. A version of yourself that felt too far away to ever become. Now ask yourself, with genuine honesty, how much of that impossibility lived in the world, and how much of it lived inside your own mind? Almost all of it was inside you. I have watched students come to train who arrive with tremendous physical ability and almost no progress over years. And I have watched others arrive with limited natural gifts and surpass everyone around them. The difference was never the body. The difference was always the relationship between the person and their own resistance. The first kind of student fights their limitations as if they are enemies. They argue with them. They are offended by them. Every time they encounter the edge of their current ability, they treat it as a personal insult, as proof that they do not belong, as evidence that they should stop. And so they do, not because the limitation was unpassable, but because they made it personal. They made it mean something about their worth. And when something threatens your sense of worth, the mind will do anything to avoid it. The second kind of student meets their limitations with curiosity, not positivity, not forced enthusiasm, curiosity. They stand at the edge of what they can do and they look at it the way a craftsman looks at a difficult piece of wood, with interest, with patience, with the quiet confidence that the thing can be understood, and that understanding leads to mastery. Do you see the difference? One treats the obstacle as a verdict, the other treats it as information. The obstacle inside you is not your weakness. It is your fear of what your weakness means about you. This is the deeper layer that most people never reach, because most people never stay still long enough to find it. In a world that moves at the speed it moves at today, where every moment can be filled with noise, with screens, with stimulation, with distraction, the idea of sitting quietly with your own resistance feels almost unbearable. And so people move, they change jobs, they change relationships, they change cities, they change routines, they move because movement feels like progress. But movement without direction is just running in circles. And you can run for a very long time in circles before you are exhausted enough to finally stop and ask, what am I running from? You are running from yourself, not the self you wish you were, not the self others expect you to be. The self that actually exists right now, with all its contradictions, all its unresolved questions, all its fear and doubt and uncertainty. That self, the one you have been trying to outrun since you were young enough to understand that being that self came with certain kinds of pain. Every wall you believe stands between you and your goal was first built in the mind. Let me show you how this building happens, because it is so subtle, so quiet, that most people never catch it in the act. It begins with an experience. Something fails, something hurts, someone leaves, something you trusted turns out to be unreliable. And in that moment of pain, the mind does what the mind was designed to do. It looks for a pattern. It looks for a way to protect you from experiencing that same pain again. And so it draws a conclusion. Sometimes that conclusion is spoken out loud. More often, it is never spoken at all. It simply settles into the way you see the world, as quietly and as permanently as dust settling on a surface. I am not the kind of person who succeeds at this kind of thing. People like me do not get to live that kind of life. Every time I get close, something takes it away. I am not smart enough, not talented enough, not disciplined enough, not young enough, not fortunate enough. These are the bricks, these small, quiet, internal conclusions. And once enough of them are placed, one on top of the other, over the years, you end up standing before what feels like a solid, immovable wall. But here is the thing about a wall built from beliefs. It has no actual weight. You could pass through it right now, this moment, if you were willing to examine it honestly and ask, is this actually true? Or is this just what the mind concluded to protect itself from pain? Most of the time, when you hold the belief up to the light, it begins to dissolve. Not because you forced it away with positive thinking, not because you chanted over it or wished it gone, but because in the direct light of honest examination, it reveals itself for what it always was, a conclusion drawn in pain by a younger version of you who did not yet have the tools to respond differently. Have compassion for that younger version. They did what they could with what they had, but you do not have to carry their conclusions forever. The moment you stop identifying with the barrier, you discover there was a door all along. I want to be very precise about what I mean by identifying with the barrier, because this is where the real work lives. To identify with the barrier means to make it part of your story of who you are. It means that when you say, I cannot do this, the word I has merged with the word cannot. The barrier is no longer something you are experiencing. It has become something you are. And when the barrier is who you are, there is nothing left to work with. You cannot fix what you have become. You can only defend it but the moment you take one small step back from it, the moment you introduce even the thinnest gap between the observer and the observed, everything changes. Instead of, I cannot do this, you begin to say, there is resistance here, there is a pattern here, there is a belief here that says, I cannot do this, and I am the one watching that belief, which means I am not the belief. That gap, that tiny, almost invisible gap between you and the story your mind is telling about you, that is where freedom begins. It is not a dramatic freedom. Do not expect lightning. Do not expect tears and transformation in an afternoon. Real change does not announce itself. Real change is quiet. It is the quiet decision made over and over again in small moments to look at the wall honestly instead of looking away from it, to sit with the discomfort of uncertainty instead of filling it with distraction, to ask the difficult question instead of choosing the comfortable answer. This is practice. This is what practice means, not the performance of effort, not the appearance of discipline, but the genuine, daily, quiet act of returning to honesty about what is actually here and choosing to respond to what is actually here, rather than to the story your mind has built around it. Every person sitting in this room right now is standing in front of something. Some are standing in front of a relationship they do not know how to repair. Some are standing in front of a version of themselves they cannot seem to become. Some are standing in front of a grief they have not yet allowed themselves to fully feel. Some are standing in front of a decision they have been postponing for years, because the moment they make it, they will have to stop pretending they have not already made it. And all of them, every single one, have been told by their minds that the thing they are standing in front of is a wall. It is not a wall. It is a mirror. It is showing you exactly what you have not yet been willing to see about yourself. And that can feel terrifying. I do not minimize that. The moment of honest self-examination is one of the most uncomfortable experiences a human being can have, because what you find in that mirror is not always what you hoped. Sometimes you find fear where you expected courage. Sometimes you find grief where you expected indifference. Sometimes you find anger where you expected peace. But you also find something else, something that every single person who has ever committed to genuine self-examination has found without exception. You find that the thing in the mirror is workable, not perfect, not already resolved, not something that will go away without effort, but workable, reachable, accessible, possible, because it is yours. It is inside you. And what is inside you, you have the capacity to meet, to examine, to understand, and ultimately to transform. You cannot transform the economy. You cannot transform your past. You cannot transform other people. But you can, with patience, with honesty, with consistent practice, transform your relationship to all of those things. And a transformed relationship is a transformed life. Let me bring it back to the simplest version of this truth, because the simplest version is always the most honest one. You are sitting where you are right now because of the sum of every decision, every avoidance, every belief, every moment of courage, and every moment of fear that has led you here. Some of those inputs were not in your control, but most of the ones that matter were. And the next steps, the ones that will determine where you are 5 years from now, 10 years from now, at the end of this life, those are also in your hands, not in the hands of circumstances, not in the hands of what other people do or do not do for you. In your hands, inside you. And that is not a burden. I know it can feel like one. I know that the idea of full responsibility for your own life can feel crushing, especially when you have spent years looking outward for the source of your difficulty. But I want to offer you a different way of holding it. If the obstacle is inside you, then so is the solution. The thing that can move the wall is in the same place as the wall, which means you already have everything you need. Not in the future when you have read more, learned more, prepared more, achieved more. Right now, in this body, in this moment, in this breath, the wall does not move until the mind that built it is willing to examine the blueprints. But the moment it does, the moment genuine honesty is brought to bear on even one small belief that has been quietly limiting you, something shifts. Not everything, not all at once, but something. And that something, if you are patient with it, if you give it the same attention and care that you would give any living thing that you want to grow, will become everything. This is why I say, you are closer than you think. Not because the journey is short, the journey is long, and it asks everything of you, but because the door you are looking for is right here. The key you are searching for is already in your hand. You have simply been looking outward for a door that has always opened inward. Turn around, look honestly, take one step. That is the beginning. That is the whole beginning. One honest step, taken now from exactly where you are. The obstacle is not out there. It never was.